Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I'm Asma Naeem. I'm the Dorothy Wagner Wallace Director here at the Baltimore Museum of Art. It is truly a joy to be with you again. I hope you're not getting sick of me, but we are really riding a wave here of fantastic presentations. And I will say that what you're about to hear will be a treat for your eyes and ears. I'm delighted you have joined us for this conversation in celebration of the debut of The Hour of the Dog, Akomfrah. A new 6-channel installation co-commissioned by us here at the Baltimore Museum of Art and the Menil Collection in Houston. The Hour of the Dog turns to the civil rights movement in the United States from about 1956 to 1963, so those 7 years, reflecting on the courage of young activists who transformed this country. Through newly filmed scenes combined with archival footage and layered sound, Sir John Akomfrah has created an environment that invites us to experience history not as something distant, not as something dusty, but as proximate and reverberating, calling us to shape the world we inhabit now. The film is accompanied by a companion timeline tracing 4 centuries of local and national activism around civil rights. It's an incredible, incredible journey. It was developed in partnership with our wonderful colleagues at 4 organizations: Afro Charities, the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum, the Maryland Center for History and Culture, and the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture. I'd like to thank my colleagues there for their incredible, incredible partnership to create what I think is going to be a timeline that we will refer to for many years forward. From early resistance and abolition to student-led desegregation campaigns, the stories gathered here remind us that national movements for civil rights have always been shaped by local action. Alongside the timeline, a Join the Movement wall offers a way for visitors to respond with postcards that highlight a Baltimore-based organization continuing the work of justice and community care today. It's really quite an engaging wall and presentation, and I urge you to take one of those cards and think about how you can participate. You can scan the code, you can get involved, and together these elements, the timeline, the visitor engagement activity, together these elements connect the Hour of the Dog to Baltimore today and to the collective ethos that continues to drive change, because we are not going to be silent. We are profoundly grateful to the curatorial team who helped to create this incredible installation along with Sir John Akomfrah and his team. First, I'd like to thank the head of Contemporary, Cecilia Wickman. Cecilia, you did another outstanding job. Michelle White was our colleague at the Menil Collection. She's senior curator. It's been a pleasure to work with her. Thank you, Michelle. And our wonderful curatorial assistant, Oscar Flores Montero. Thank you, Oscar. This exhibition would not have been possible without the glorious, and I mean the glorious, support of Stanley Mazeroff, whose generosity has made this commission and exhibition possible and free to the public. Stan, we extend our profound gratitude to you. Now a little bit about our speakers before they join us on the stage. John Akomfrah is one of the most visionary artists of our time working today. For more than 4 decades, first with Black Audio Film Collective and now with Smoking Dog Films, Sir John has explored histories and how histories have shaped or have been shaped by migration, memory, and activism. And he carries them through in what I can only describe as the Sir John Akomfrah style, an incredibly multi-layered archaeological, but also incredibly phenomenologically deep experience of film and sound. His groundbreaking debut, Handsworth Songs, did not shy away from one of the most traumatic events in UK history, a landmark documentary on the London-Birmingham riots, the race riots in 1985. This searing work set the stage for decades of visionary storytelling. Sir John's work has been widely exhibited and collected by major institutions all around the world. And I know we say that, all around the world, but this is truly all around the world. From Taiwan to Sao Paulo and New Zealand to the United Arab Emirates, John's work is honored and revered everywhere. Among his many accolades are being knighted for his contributions to art and culture in 2023. So he is, in fact, Sir John Akomfrah. He represented Ghana at the Venice Biennale in 2019, and then he represented Great Britain at the Venice Biennale in 2024, where his breathtaking 64-channel installation set a bar that, dare say, no other will ever meet. Sir John has also received another incredible award, the inaugural Baltimore Museum of Art Artist Who Inspires Award, last year at our BMA ball. Yay! We are extremely proud to debut The Hour of the Dog at the BMA and to add it to our collection. This will be a story that can be told for generations. Our deepest gratitude and appreciation goes to Sir John and his collaborators in Smoking Dogs film, Lena Gopal and Ashti Akomfrah, who I know are in the audience. Lena and Ashti, thank you. Sir John, what you do with your brilliant work is you call out to the world, a clarion call to listen, to turn away from fear, and to heed the necessity for action. And I will now, before these speakers come onto the stage, I want to take a moment to introduce the fearless companion to Sir John in the realm of social activism, the one, the only, the brilliant, and why isn't she president, Sherrilyn Ifill. Professor Sherrilyn Ifill is a trailblazing civil rights lawyer, former president of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, where she advocated for voting rights and racial justice for nearly a decade. And indeed, if you pay attention to the timeline in the exhibition, you'll see Sherrilyn's work cited. Professor Ifill is also a celebrated scholar and author of On the Courthouse Lawn, Confronting the Legacy of Lynching in the 21st Century, a pioneering work that has helped catalyze national conversations on racial reconciliation. Professor Ifill taught at the University School of Law in Baltimore for 20 years and currently serves as the Vernon Jordan Chair in Civil Rights at Howard University, where she founded the 14th Amendment Center for Law and Democracy. This woman is tireless. In addition to serving as a BMA trustee since 2020, she was named one of Time's 100 most influential people in 2021 and one of Time's Women of the Year in 2022, and also received the inaugural Baltimore Museum of Art Changemaker Who Inspires Award at the Baltimore Museum of Art Ball last year. Professor Ifill continues to inspire change and challenge inequity at every level. We're thrilled she could join us today for this conversation. I will say that many of us art historians know the direct relationship, and I will say direct, between a robust artistic community who speaks their truth against oppression and the glow and the rise of social justice. We now have Professor Ifill writing about how democracy and the world of artists not just thrive because of the other, but enrich each other. Lastly, before I have our guests join the stage, I know that whenever I am personally facing an issue of complexity, I stop and ask, WWSD. What would Sherrilyn do? Because there simply is no other. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Sir John Akomfrah and Sherrilyn Ifill.
There it is. I was thanking them for the walk-on music. And I don't think that I heard enough enthusiasm for the extraordinary leader of this institution, Asma Naeem, for whom we are so blessed to have her. So thank you, Asma, and the team here at the BMA, one of Baltimore's treasures. And thank you to my new friend, John Akomfrah. We have been cutting up in the back, let me just say, so we're going to try to pull it together for this conversation. This is a great privilege, and it just means a lot because I love Baltimore, my adopted hometown, and I demand that we have the highest quality, and you are the highest quality, and so I'm very excited that our people will get a chance to see this exhibit and to talk with you today. Some folks here may not be familiar with your work and the arc of your career, and I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about your life, coming from Ghana to England, to Great Britain, and the transition of that experience and what it has meant for you. I think you might have a mic first.
Okay. Oh, yes. So I have. Is it already on? Yes, it is. Okay. Asma, thank you so much for that intro. I'm always slightly surprised when I hear it. I think, who are they talking about?
You.
And thank you, Sherrilyn, for agreeing to do this. It's an honor to meet you again. We were here last year together to both receive that honor, and I was amazed. I remember thinking, oh, we must do this one day. So I'm glad
And it happened.
It's a good question to ask me because I think it's the most interesting foray into the project here, the work. Because people say to me, literally since I got here, why were you doing something on the civil rights movement? And a lot of it is bound up with my family history, so I think it's kind of important to say something about that very briefly. Both my parents were political activists, anti-colonial activists in the then Gold Coast, which became Ghana in '57, the year I was born, and continued in that world onto the military coup, which drove us out of Ghana in 1966. And between 52 and 66, my life overlapped with multiple diasporic lives. So I remember living about 10 doors away from the grand old man of Pan-Africanism, W.E.B. Du Bois, when he lived in Ghana. Died in '63. But I remember very clearly walking past and then asking my mum, who's that white guy?
Oh, I love it.
and that was my first lesson to race. He's not, And she explained why. I remember her meeting Malcolm X when he came to the university. She was doing her postgraduate working in '64. I remember her telling us about meeting Maya Angelou. So there's a sense in which the intimacy that anyone in this country assumes with that history is one that I shared. And I think it's also a world that, in a way, is disappearing, but was around, between, the 1830s. all the way to 1952, you know, if you were a person of color, a race person, you were expected to know this stuff. You were expected to know who Harriet Tubman was, and, you know, Booker T. Washington. You were supposed to know this. You were supposed to know what 1956 was, what the Brown versus Board of Education, you know. All of these were just the vernacular of being a cosmopolitan black person. And so it doesn't feel to me to be a foreign quote-unquote story, you know? It doesn't feel like an out-there narrative. In fact, if anything, I'm surprised when people feel that, because it tells you that something's disappearing in our lives. You know, that sense of Pan-Africanity is dwindling in its significance. Does that say enough?
No, it does, and it reminds me, you know, when I tell people that Thurgood Marshall, you know, who we revere, the great civil rights lawyer who created the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, was largely responsible for the Brown decision. You know, he had been roommates with Kwame Nkrumah at Lincoln University. And he traveled to Ghana to help with the drafting of the Constitution. Yes, liberation. And so the connections that you're talking about, so many young African students were here at HBCUs. And so there was this very rich exchange and interchange between race men across the various continents. So that is in fact true. So I want to debunk a little bit of mystery just right at the beginning, because I don't know how many people here have seen the show already, but I suspect that a number have not. And the name of the show is The Hour of the Dog. And because people can be quite literal, I want to dispel the idea that this is an installation about canines or so why don't we start out so that we can just be surrounded by the context and no one will wonder. And I know you explained it in the installation as well, but why don't we just take that mystery off the table?
Sure.
What is the Hour of the Dog?
In the Chinese zodiac, the hour of the dog is the time of twilight, the space between day and night. And it's also the time when the two forces, life forces, yin and yang, are at their most ambivalent. One's dwindling, but the other one isn't kind of born yet. And I'm always looking for metonyms, ways of narrativizing events, stories, that reduces everything to a kind of parable. So you understand from the get-go, from the name, what we're trying to do. In many ways, it seems to me that the period we're talking about, 56 to 63 in the film, is the hour of the dog, you know, is when, you know...
the transition
yes,
time.
Young people of color, African American on the whole, decide, okay, we are going to commit acts of trespass. We're going to move into spaces that we've been told we can't go into, you know, and it could have gone either way. You know? It could have gone anyway. So I'm interested in these spaces of liminality, when things grow and are born, but they don't know in advance where they're going to arrive at, which is why the name is there.
I love it. And, you know, if you haven't, you should go on YouTube, and because I could listen to John talk all day. And so there are these interviews with him where you're just kind of, you know, you're just in some other state as he, you know, talks about his work and talks about the world. And just yesterday at the board meeting that I was at, one of my fellow board members could not believe I was having this conversation with you and got all excited and said, "You could not be more of a fan than I am." And he said, I listened to John Akomfrah on my morning walks.
Oh, no.
And so we started to say, hey, did you hear the interview about did you read the one about I want to talk about many conversations that you've had about your interest in time.
Yeah, okay.
In exploring time and kind of why. I mean, this, even your description of the Hour of the Dog fits with that, but what is it? I mean, you talked about your attraction to painting that focuses on the change of time, you know. And just in your film work, it spans time. Sometimes it's broad. Sometimes it's time that's just within a day. What are you trying to catch?
I mean, crudely, I'm interested in time because I work largely, not wholly, but largely in an indexical machine, a machinery that generates time, cinema, or time-based work. I work in moving image work mainly, so I'm interested in time for that. But in a broader sense, I'm interested in lives lived and imagined. The gap between the two is usually where you would find the work that I do. So the time of protest, inside its mechanisms, you see where people are at and where they want to be. And I'm interested in that. I'm interested in both, the traffic between the two. But it's not always the case. I mean, every work throws up a different question of temporality, a different question of time for you. This one, as I said, is principally about that period between the two, but it's also about the decisions made in that space of liminality to commit to acts of trespass. So you can see, you watch these kids and they, young black kids in, I don't know, Selma in 1963, and they come out of a Baptist church, and you could see them thinking, okay, we're going to do this.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because one of the wonderful things about this installation, which is on 6 screens, is hearing the voices of young people.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the ones we all know. We all know John Lewis's voice, and he was a very young man during that period. We know that Martin Luther King was 26 when he was asked to lead the Montgomery Improvement Association. So we know that they were very young. Maybe we don't know, and so for people who don't know, those who were most active in the civil rights movement were extremely young. They were extremely young, and very often those who were older, even within the black community, were quite
Young.
we're quite dismissive of what the young people were doing, right? So, you have college students like Diane Nash, who, we hear from lots in Baltimore, who was protesting in Nashville, and they were seeking to open lunch counters and so forth. And, their schools, often HBCUs, was suspending them, didn't want them to be engaged in activism. So when we're hearing these voices, we are hearing, and you can hear it in their what they're saying, but you just described this intentional decision to do this work. So I wish you could say more about that, and also how you chose the voices to hear, because I mean, I've sifted through a lot of civil rights archives, but these were not, I'd never heard most of these voices before. I mean, I'd heard, Wyatt T. Walker and the other kind of leaders, but the young people, and it was astounding to hear the confidence and certainty.
I mean, several people were very helpful on the way in helping me make the decision for it to be about the age group, that demographic. One was a book, the name of which I've forgotten now, but it's a book about the Freedom Rides, photographic essay on the Freedom Rides, and it had almost every single person, the mugshot of every single person who was arrested, the 300. And occasionally it will have a photograph of them if they were still alive. So on one page you'll have them as a young person arrested in 61, and on the next page them as a 60-year-old or 70-year-old. And I was struck by two things. One, their ages. I mean, almost the average age was 20. 20. And most of them were, in the main, people you've never heard of, even now. You know, so you can see the James Bevels and the Diane Ashes. Diane Ash actually isn't in the picture because she's one of the few who didn't go, stayed behind to make sure that everything was okay.
She was running the whole thing, right? So
And
she was
actually,
the command,
it wasn't okay.
the
So it was
command
just as well.
center. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's just as well she stayed behind. But, you know, whether it's Bevel or C.T. Vivian, James Lawson, all these people were, you know, and they were the elders. James Lawson was one of the older ones, and he was still in his 20s.
They were all in divinity. The elders were in divinity school, you know.
Late 20s.
Yeah.
You think, oh, okay. And so just that alone was a kind of animating factor for me. I thought, okay, let's find a way of giving these figures a voice again. Because in a way, that's kind of what you fight for, isn't it? You fight to be in the light. You fight for your voice to be amplified by your actions. And you hope that the amplification of that voice, usually of dissent, will make a difference.
Were you struck by how many were women?
Yes. I was struck by both the racial and gender composition of the Freedom Rise. It was quite shocking. I mean, because I just assumed that almost everyone was black, and the majority were of the 300, but there were a lot of young white men and women, a disproportionately high number of priests, and a lot of black women. That surprised me as well. I don't know why, but it did. You know, very, very, very young black women. And a lot of them are in the project. So if you get the chance to see them, you see what I mean. Because you can see the acne on their faces, and they're still very, very young people.
The faces are unbelievable because they are, to me, they're babies, you know.
Yes.
But there's something in that, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah. Because when you look in their eyes, you can see. I mean, so these are mugshots being taken by police officers of them to then put them in jail. And they were going to go to jail and not get bailed because they didn't want to get bailed. I mean, most of them were freed in the end, but they were, and you look in their eyes and you can see it.
the determination, the certainty,
Yeah.
and some even a little sassy in the mug shots. I mean, there was, there's just full-on intentionality. But I actually wanted to pause there for a second because I had a moment watching the array of mug shots. As a symbol of how the world responds to unruly children. It's very nice now to see the heroism of the civil rights movement, but as I was saying, it was not greeted with, it's certainly not by white people, but often not by black people of a certain age and status. So we're looking and we're listening, and I'm doing what you're doing. I'm listening to their voices. I'm looking in their eyes, but they're mugshots. These young people have been imprisoned for the simple desire to sit with dignity as a first-class citizen at a lunch counter, or to ride in a bus with someone of another race, or enter a waiting room. And I just wonder what you've been thinking about as we, in this moment, what that says to us.
I mean, one of the things I'm very keen on always exploring is a feeling I have about images in general. Because it seems to me that all images have a utopian dimension. What do I mean by that? The promise of the image is to say to me, and certainly to you, I am being created this moment, but I will meet you in the future. And when I meet you in the future, you will see what I intended. So when you look at these kids...
Stop for 1 second. Just pause on that.
Sorry.
You're not going to be just dropping these pearls and we just keep it moving. Okay. Let's pause. Say that one more time.
How about saying it this way? When you look at all of those images, the mugshots, you see what they intended. And it's not for the moment, but for later. right? So I'm looking at them and they say to the mechanism that's recording them, I know you're watching me, and my voice will say to you now, even though you will not understand it, that we're going to be free. So this is a recording for the future. All images have that. Because the moment they're recorded is always in the past by the time you see them. Yeah? So all images necessarily are made for an elsewhere to come, a moment to come. And images about our fate are particularly poignant for that. Because the action, whether it's, when you hear King saying we're going to embody love and make love be the principle, the guide for our actions. When he's saying it for later, not just then. People believe passionately that they were going to be free, that the act of trespass will yield something. They believe that, and you can see it in their eyes. You see people say, okay, you think I am degraded. You think I'm some small kid, but I understand something about history that you definitely don't understand, which is that this is not going to last for long. Yeah? So I'm a kind of facsimile from the future for you now, but you won't understand it. So it will be us. We will get it, and we do. You see it, and you can see it very clearly.
I felt it powerfully. You have a segment, I think you repeated a few times, where King says, and everyone's heard him say it, but this time, because I'm in the future, and I'm seeing it, it struck me so powerfully. He says, if we're going to free the soul of this nation, we have to free everyone, which means we have to also free white people. And then he just pauses and says, they're not free. And in this film, like just sitting listening to it the other day, I was almost near tears, because here we are in the future and we can see it. Maybe at that time it sounded crazy, but now we're living it. To some, but now we're living it, and so that's really powerful. Wow.
There's a curious way in which Greg Tate, when he was alive, God bless him, always spoke about this,
The art critic, Greg Tate.
The science fictional nature of our histories and lives. So you're watching this stuff, and it's almost like a futurist manifesto. Kids are marching, and there's a sort of quality of braggadocio in their stance. Yes. And it's not one that's informed by how they're living then. So it's a kind of futurist step. It's almost people saying to themselves, I'm going to walk this way with this confidence, because I know the future will validate this confidence. And they were right. The future did validate their confidence. King also said something in the film that I thought was really interesting. I took it out in the end because I thought, okay, he says it, but you don't hear it. Which is that the worst places in the American South were also the spaces that most delivered for the civil rights movement. Alabama was the worst place on the planet. And yet all the major events...
Mississippi saying, hold my beer.
Well, Mississippi wasn't bombing churches and killing black girls. It was, yeah, okay. So who wants this hierarchy of terrible stuff? But literally everything, and I was surprised by that, everything of any significance in that, in terms of milestones in the civil rights calendar.
Well, he also intentionally, that's why many of the campaigns were targeted at the worst places.
Yes.
Right? Because, there were places where for black people, they didn't have much to lose to try to make the effort. And also, he knew that the reaction of the whites would likely be one that would be useful, right?
Indeed. Indeed.
Garnering more widespread support.
But no one can help it. I mean, you see part of the pleasures involved in making things like this is you get to see hours of stuff, you know. If you research properly, a lot comes in. Some you don't end up using, but it still informs what you do. And one of the things I saw was a White Citizens Council meeting in Birmingham, Alabama, and there was Bull Connor, the police chief who set the dogs on all these kids. There he was. Otherwise, council meeting.
That was supposed to be for the gentleman, actually, gentle lady.
But there he was. Okay.
Yeah, and you also have some footage in the film of. Some trigger warning, white supremacist candidates for governor, but it's super important to hear in their words their ideology.
Yes, I think so.
And to hear the obsession with miscegenation and just to really understand, cracked and corrupt as it was, the world that they lived in their heads. It's very helpful for this moment where very often many of us are saying, I don't understand how you could think that. I don't, that you can, if it's reinforced by your neighbors, you can be in a whole world that is not real, right?
I mean, some of it is so offensive that even I couldn't. so there's the Attorney General of Georgia makes a speech in the project, and at some point you just see his lips moving. I just couldn't bring myself to let people know any more about what he was saying. It was so offensive. I mean, just so disgusting that you think, okay, let something else take over now. You can stay as an image, but I don't have to listen to this anymore. I think some of it's important because you really do need that wall, that monolith of supremacy in order to get why, all these young people just instinctively understand that they need to fight it. Because it's a wall. It's like literally 2001. It's a monolith, and they're trying to get over that. At some point, someone says, no, let's just push it over. If we all get together and try and push it over, we can make it.
But you're a person doing the work, and I really appreciate you saying that about this Attorney General. I had a position when I was, and still when I ever write about lynching or I'm asked to talk about it or participate in a conference or some writing, that I don't show the body of lynched black men. I just don't. I mean, I even, the first edition of my book, there is a photograph on the front. The point of the photograph was the faces of the white people watching. And you can see that a body is, but you can't see a face or anything. And the title of the book is kind of over the body, right? That we do get to make that decision. That, if you've read 200-300 accounts of lynching as I have, do you have to, I do think that's actually important to hold yourself even in this work.
I mean, the thing is, once you encounter the supernova of white supremacy in its radiance, I mean, it's not that I believe one should censor this stuff or anything, but I just think sometimes the intensity could be suggested or even understood differently if we don't necessarily expose ourselves to the full supernova effect of their presence. So occasionally I decided, and the reason I was saying that was just to tell you that if what you see in it is offensive, just imagine what I've left out.
He's protecting you. I think it's important, and I always think there's a line between, wanting to be very, very truthful and also dignity. There is a kind of, there's a dignity for the person observing and hearing, and in the case of lynched black men, there's a dignity to them. I didn't want them to just be bodies. So you have actually a very long body of work. Before I ask you this question, I skip this one. Why film? So you start doing the work that you do, and you're surrounded. It's a very creative time. Like, it sounds, I have these fantasies. My kids know that I was like, I should have been in London. It just sounds so great. Oh, you guys just doing your great stuff and being artists. And I always wanted to be a part of that, And it just sounded great. You had chunky sweaters on, and you just seemed...
Where did you see that?
Listen, I'm just telling you. And so and you knew all these amazing people, and you all were in these studios and just creating and creating and creating and being amazing. Why film?
I mean, at some point, I don't know why. There was an argument, a discussion within the collective about whether we should...
Talk about the collective.
So Black Audio Film Collective was collective group of individuals who all met. I think we met in 76, 77, at the equivalent of high school. And then we went all the way through to university.
It's true what I was saying.
Yeah, okay. Maybe you don't need to tell him. And people were doing different things. There were people in the art department or sociology, cultural studies department. And at some point, we had to decide what to focus on. I was always one of the people arguing for time-based work because it felt more collaborative, felt more collective. Paintings required that you kind of do it a bit like death on your own, and I you know what I mean? Like, it's like you go in your studio on your own and I'm like, no. Didn't want that. And it didn't seem to, it felt like we needed something overly polemical, something which was unnecessarily confrontational, but necessary in a way, but done with a certain kind of intelligence. Here we are, we're kind of post-high school, university, everyone's got an MA, So we weren't going to pretend that we weren't educated. But it was about trying to bring that education to bear on the questions that the education was supposed to steer us away from.
Subversion.
Now that you're educated, you don't really want to deal with black stuff because that's for people who are not, we wanted to reverse that. And I think film just felt like the perfect medium for people who wanted to work collectively, which is why we went into it.
I thought it might have been influenced by, you talked about the London, Birmingham riots, and that's 85, that's kind of late,
Yes,
but still,
yes,
there were these times, it was a time that was roiling also in New York. We had a lot of police violence and so forth, and I always felt that these two things were happening at the same time, and so many creatives in London seemed to kind of be shaped. I've just heard people like Zadie Smith and, Steve McQueen, like, just talk about that period. I thought that might have been, because it was so dynamic that film seemed like I don't know.
I mean,
am I wrong?
Okay. No, but the thing which I think is worth stressing, and because that's what's different from here, is that my generation, people born between 55 and 62, 63, were the first group of black people born en masse in mainland Britain. And that's really important to understand. Our parents were British, but they were elsewhere. They were in the colonies. We were the first generational group born en masse in our hundreds and thousands inside Britain. And so you started to come of age at the time when the culture is trying to process what it had gone through, decolonization, and where it was going to go. And on the whole, it felt that people like us should sit down and just watch the show. And we were trying to persuade it that it needed to hear what we had to say, because we understood the Janus-faced nature of the culture. It needed to hear people. There was no point in making films or writing about black kids when black kids can do it themselves and tell you more eloquently. So that's one of the main reasons why we felt a kind of generational responsibility you know. I mean, Steve and Sadie are part of it, but they're sort of almost at the end of that cycle that I'm talking about. By the time you get to them, they're like, oh, listen, I don't even need to tell you why I'm doing this. We're just going to do it. Whereas my generation felt the need to say that. We felt the need to preface our statements by saying, listen, we are from this place. We're not like our parents. We're going to speak from this place. But you hear black talk. Okay? It's not going to be, you know, colonial talk or foreign talk. It's from here, you know. And film at the time felt like the most immediate way of doing that, you know.
I mean, I'm astonished by the ability to pull on so many different themes around, you know, oppression, colonialism, and imperialism, and systemic racism, and to span the globe in the work. I mean, you're looking at the Irish, and you're looking at Vietnam, and you're looking at, you know, the Caribbean. You're looking at all of these things, and you're pulling them together. And I guess I want, and then now this piece, and I want to kind of tell us, what have you learned that we can that we can use? You know, you have been pulling these threads from all these different sites and also experiences of organized oppression. And here we are in a global moment when, you know, the oppressors are trying to run the tables. And I'm just wondering, having done the work that you've done, whether there's something you feel like you have come to about this moment. This is what happens when we get older. We get asked
questions like this to be
elder,
sage.
Elder
like.
status. Yes.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint. Only because what I'm going to say is not completely adequate to the task that you've set me. I mean, and it's to do with why I did all of those things. I mean, when you're 15 and you see stuff about the Vietnam War, that becomes part of you. And 17 and the Irish Republican Army, or the IRA as they were called, were bombing centres in London. That becomes part of you. So these are all, I've got a kind of idea fix of autobiographical segments that mean something to me personally. You know, the first black man who dies in the 60s, beaten by a police officer, meant something to me, because I'm like, oh, okay, this could happen to you. Those sorts of things. So I'm interested in trying to understand how the family of things come about, mine as well as everybody else's. And if anything, that's all I will offer. That actually, if we all do that, then we'll be halfway there. If we all just recognize that our circle, our family of things, includes more than just your immediate family or your immediate interests, ethnicity, gender. You know, if we just realize that our family of things includes more than just us, we'll be halfway there. Because partly what's going on now is for people to be told that, oh, actually, you know, you're just this. You know, in England at the moment, there's a party that I never thought would ever have the kind of authority and power to speak white supremacist language, and yet they are the leading party. And now what they say to people is, the last 35 years is a mistake. All these quote-unquote foreigners and migrants who came, they're a mistake. Go back to being white, for instance. Go back to being British, English. But the definition of Englishness and Britishness is now so narrow. It's so small that it actually is unhelpful, even for them. You know? And so you kind of need to, more than ever, remind people to widen their spheres, to just be more open to not just possibilities, but the realities of your lives. You know, that includes more than just what you think. And if we do just that, we'll be okay. I'm actually really optimistic about the future.
Okay. No, I know what you mean. I mean, I think, watching the most pointless and insane thing you can do is believe that you can stop the future. It's just, I mean, and I feel like that's what we're seeing in mass, It's like...
Because the language in which we are meant to be captured increasingly feels like unreal. I mean, racist language feels more and more just strange. You think, you can't seriously believe this shit. Can you really? How can you believe this? It's just archaic. I mean, it doesn't fit any of the understandings we have about humanity, the world, biology. It doesn't fit anything.
Yeah, but that's when it gets, I think, that's the part that's horror movie, the horror movie aspect of it, which is that it is that, it's, Vincent Price, I'll put the pieces together. I'm going to my laboratory and he's obviously insane, right? But that's the part, right? Is the willingness to, and he does it in, all those movies. He destroys himself in the pursuit of this mad thing, right? And that's what I feel is happening, right? I mean, you and I had a conversation about Brexit the other day. Like, was that a good thing? That seems crazy, right? And we have these two countries. We're from these two countries. You, England, me from the United States, that are more than land and money and and anything that is tactile. They are both ideas. And in fact, they derive their greatest power from being ideas. England is an idea, right? That it's if you've ever gone to England and you've gone to the sites, that we learn about in school. I remember when I went to Balmoral Castle.
Wow.
And with my daughter. And they don't actually let you into the whole thing. It's literally, first of all, you have to travel like 2 hours or something to get there. This is the Scottish castle that the Queen is her favorite. And you get up there, and she basically, the late Queen, has like a room where you can go and see like some crowns and some, and then I'm like, and now what? And they're like, no, that's it. Right? If you're standing in that space in London where you can see Big Ben and it's so crowded and all the buildings are up on each other, it's not like really what you were thinking. You know what I mean? It's like people who want to be in Times Square on New Year's Eve. Like, what? Right? So it's just, we're an idea. And to see the ruination of the idea, I mean, the idea has lots of currency. Right? It brings tourist dollars. It gives you more power in a room than perhaps you deserve. I mean, England's been punching above its weight, Forever. Listen, when you were a kid and you finally looked on the map, after all those years when you learned about, and then you saw England, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to really but you looked on the map and you were like, what the hell? That little island? It's like, but there's value in being the idea, and the same is true of the United States. The idea of the United States, the music, so much of which comes from its diversity, from black people. What is the United States without black people that people want, right? So, you just think about.
Absolutely.
So, but what I'm saying is, this is the horror movie part, because you're right about what you're saying, but the horror movie part is the willingness to destroy the currency. What do you make of that? I'm sorry, excuse us. We got to talk about this.
We started 2 days ago, and we're still at it. No, I agree with you absolutely, but that's precisely why I'm saying, I think in a way we need to name it for exactly what it is. And part of it feels to me as if you need to do these two difficult things. One is to recognize the weight of it, and the efficacy of it, but also the hollowness of it, the increasingly shrill hollowness of it. As much as Trump would like to be, he's not Andrew Jackson, He might want to sound like Andrew Jackson, but he's not. He feels like a kind of weird, pale facsimile of Andrew Jackson, And it seems to me that in a way that Marx used to talk about this as, the solidity of things melting into air. You feel that increasingly with racializations or subjectivizations, which are supposedly based on race. They feel increasingly hollow. So you have a Brexit, and the unspoken is, if we have this place and we vote to not be part of Europe, then all these foreigners will go away. It's a complete fantasy, and it was never going to happen. I mean, we're still there. So you see people and you think, did you really think this is going to work? But they do it. And that's the hollowness I'm talking about. There's a kind of sureness. It doesn't destroy the efficacy of it, the power of it. But the power is increasingly based on something that feels insubstantial. And we need to keep remembering that, because otherwise it feels too overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. It's a way to put it, right-size it.
Yes.
To right-size it.
Right-size it.
Okay, so we've been deep. Now we're going to, but this is deep too. I do have to ask you a little bit about technique. You said you love the collaboration. Mm-hmm. I know you work with your son. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Like is it continuous filming? You're making decisions about, everything's not 6 screens. Some things are 64. It's like, how do you know how many screens? All the things. I mean, I'm art adjacent. I am not an artist myself. And so I'm always like, but how? How did they do that? So tell us a little bit about the how.
The how is a process-based thing, to be honest with you. Asman would tell you that whatever treatment I wrote for this is not what you're going to see. Because you start off with an idea, and I like surrendering to the process itself. I like giving in to the material. Because at some point, and I really do believe this, I mean, in an almost pagan, voodoo-like way, that things have spirit and matter has consciousness. Not in the way that we understand it, but it does. And at some point, things speak to you. They tell you where they sit in the order of things for you. It's not a universal language. Sometimes it's just I'm just going to say this today. When you come back tomorrow, it'll be something different. But I don't believe today, speaking to you, John Akomfrah, that this clip from Martin Luther King will work for you. You need to find something else to do. And so you listen to material and you listen to how they work, and at some point, a form begins to suggest itself. With the intensity of listening comes insight into not simply form, but duration, texture, tone, color even, and slowly the thing begins to take shape. So I must be a nightmare artist for people to work with, because I say I'll deliver tomorrow and it will be next week. Because
you sound like a writer.
Because if it's not ready, it's not leaving. I mean, I never not make deadlines, but I wait for as long as possible to be clear and sure that everything that we say or that we've heard is going to work. And in that process, you have to listen to people you work with. My son Ashley is like an indispensable part of this, because, either he's gathering stuff or he's shooting stuff for me, or amongst a whole range of people. But, we see each other every day. So, sometimes you say, John, look, this is not going to work. Let's not do this. Let's do something else. That's part of the listening. You're listening to not just the material, but also the voices around you. And slowly something emerges. So there's no method, really. There's no, other than a commitment to discursivity, to listening to things that are protean, things that suggest other ways. And that's it. I'm committed to the Commonwealth ideal. I'm committed to the idea that in the end, you can force things, people, to have a relationship with each other, even if it's just a kind of contractual, short-term thing. We can do that. And what works for film should work for life. If you can have 6 different screens that say 6 different things work for people, then the 6 people who are watching it can work together.
I love this. I love this.
That's the ethics of the project, all the projects, is to find a way of making discursivity familiar and acceptable.
And what happens on the first day of school when you have to take the project and then walk away? What does that feel like?
Not great.
Do you feel like there are things?
Yeah. There's always.
Like when you were looking at it the other day, were you like, ah?
Yes. Always. But the thing is, and I've said this before, so you won't be surprised if I say it again. It's precisely because things don't completely work for you that you do the next one. And that's all artists are like that. You paint this and you go, yeah, okay.
So let's talk about the next one. I saw this the other day, and we talked about it. The piece really only takes us up to the March on Washington, and so that's like halfway, right? I mean, and in some ways it's halfway, and there's much more to come that is so consequential. 4 weeks after the March on Washington, the 16th Street Baptist Church is blown up and the 4 girls are killed. All right? We're a year away from Selma.
Yes.
And thus a year away from the passage of the Voting Rights Act. We don't have a Civil Rights Act of 1964 yet. And obviously we don't have the later events in 67. We don't have, the Watts riots in 67 and 68. We don't have the assassination of Dr. King. There's a lot more to come. And when I saw it, I really thought, wow, this is great. This is going to be a 3-part work. And I honestly, I just think it has to happen. Like that, it's just, I want the sponsors here because it does have to happen. It does need these 2 other pieces to complete the picture because, as you said, these young people who are speaking into the future, some of that future begins to happen in that period in real time.
It does.
And we need to see that to honor those voices. I'm laying it on thick.
Yes,
to
you are.
honor those voices.
Yes, you are.
Can you see it?
Yes. Yes. I mean, at some point, it became clear that we were not and could not and should not try and cram everything into 50 minutes. So there is clearly a project, a part 2 certainly, of just 64 and 65. Such momentous and monumental years for this culture that it would be great to do that. And of course, 66 to 68 is definitely another chapter. So if someone has the money, either here or elsewhere,
House lights up. No,
we will certainly do it. And we will, yeah. We will. I just need the funds and the resources to make it because it will take probably as much as it took to make it.
Well, I'll tell you, it's extraordinary and important because as I'm watching this film, it's impossible, and you'll see when you see it, it's impossible to watch this piece and not be aware that there are very specific and intentional efforts afoot to suppress and remove and even destroy this archival material that you're working with, right now, at least in terms of public holdings. And this idea of burying history, of burying the past, of not teaching children about it, I do really believe that it is putting a little bit of pressure on artists who still have the freedom to tell the story in whatever way, sometimes in an abstract way, right?
Yes.
But who nevertheless are telling stories that are so consequential that there are people seeking to erase them.
I mean, I'm committed to, because in the end, hands up, I raise my hand and confess, this is an artwork. Because it means a huge amount to me for large slices of social history to be integrated, deconstructed, reworked, reconfigured, rethought in this space, inside galleries. It could have been a TV program, but it's not. It's an artwork, and I want that work to continue, because part of that involves salvaging, saving, restituting, and keeping alive some of that archival material. A lot of it will disappear otherwise. Some of it already has. When you see the work, you can see the ones that we can't save. We tried everything to save them. They can't be saved because the originals have gone. No one thought they were important. And it's like, it's just black folk, So what you've got are VHS copies of it or some terrible, terrible version of it, and that's all there is. But if we'd committed to not using them, then that would be it. They would be consigned to oblivion, and the hand of indifference would have won. So I'm committed to doing this because I think ethically having this work sit in these spaces is a way of saving them. They wouldn't use that. You can't put out Netflix. They wouldn't show it. It's like, oh, no, it's not 4K. We only show 4K material. You can't, but somebody has to show this stuff, even if it's quote unquote poor quality. Because it's important to us. It's important to our lives that these images, these histories, narratives circulate.
And it is artwork in the sense that what I would do with a tranche of mugshots as a civil rights lawyer is not the lens of what an artist might see and put together the story of what they mean and their significance. And I do think that's important too, like to art for art's sake, to understand that art provides us with this unique opportunity to get a lens on something that I would see in a completely different and more boring way, and that an artist allows you to see and capture in a way that allows it to speak to you in ways that it might not otherwise have. So I think it's important for that reason as well.
You need a way of conferring a certain amount of dignity on material, which is seen as not belonging to places. So you make a project about trespass and fugitivity. Well, the images have to have the right to do that. We need to move them from the police archives into the art gallery because it's a way of conferring dignity, to lives that deserve to be, to have dignity conferred on them, and that traffic is important. The traffic of saying the art world has to have certain kind of images brought into it because it widens what we mean by art. But at the same time, we also need to go to the places the art world doesn't normally go to find those things.
Oh, I love it.
This Janice Face quality of the archival work in the art world is important, for me anyway. And I think, you get it. When you sit there and you watch it, you get it. You don't necessarily have to agree with what I'm doing or how I do it, but you sit there and I dare anyone to say, oh no, that does not belong here, because by the time you see it, the argument's been made for it to be here, and it's important for it to be here. It's important for John Lewis, bless him, to be here as a 22-year-old in a police mugshot, which was supposed to be a source of shame for him. It's important for it not to be a source of shame now, but a badge of honor and pride. That's important for me.
You are my new best friend. Thank you, John. It's so wonderful, and I think you all agree that we are so lucky to have John Akomfrah with us today, his transparency, his openness, our opportunity to see this extraordinary work. Please give him a round of applause. And I'm a big believer in institutions. I know it's fun to critique them, but they are important. And so I really want another round of applause for the BMA for the work it's doing. And the way we preserve institutions, if you have enough money to contribute so that he can do part 2, please do that first. But you don't have to have that much money to contribute to the BMA. And maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'm saying it because we are in a moment in this country. I'm not shy, you shouldn't have given me the mic. And we have to support our institutions, especially here in Baltimore. We have to support our institutions. So, as we get to the end of the year, make sure you make out some checks to the BMA. Last thing I want to do. Today is the opening of the new building on 125th Street in Harlem of the Studio Museum. And if you all would turn the house lights up, what I want is for this amazing Baltimore audience to say congratulations to Thelma Golden and to the Studio Museum, and I will post it. And because what she has done is amazing. This is serious institution building work. The Studio Museum is not a government entity, right? It is our own, and we should support it and lift up this new, extraordinary, beautiful building right in the heart of Harlem on 125th Street. So I'm gonna give you the 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna take the video. You're gonna say, congratulations, Studio Museum, or we love you, Thelma Golden, or whatever you're gonna say, but something that is relevant to this point, okay?
Congratulations! Congratulations.
Thank you all so much. Have a great afternoon.